Hello and welcome. Now, sorry it's been a couple of months since I uploaded my last video, but it's been an interesting year with lockdowns, furloughs and all sorts going on. But I'm back on furlough again for the second time, so I've actually got a bit of time on my hands. So I saw an article the other day about the ban on petrol and diesel cars, which is coming in 2030 now. So I thought I'd do a little video with my thoughts and my personal opinion and start a little discussion really and see what everyone else thinks. So back in 2018, when the government first announced that they were going to ban petrol and diesel car sales for new cars from 2040, my initial reaction was that it's quite a safe date for the government to pick really. It's far enough away for petrol and diesel cars to be naturally obsolete by then, but close enough to make it look like the government were actually concerned about it and doing something about it. But now the new date of 2030 is only 10 years away, and for some car manufacturers that's only one generation of car away from everything having to be full EV. I know hybrids are getting a 5-year concession. They'll be able to sell those up until 2035, but the focus is moving in the direction of EV. Now, for those of you who don't really know me, I am heavily into electric cars, have been for many, many years, been driving electric cars for nearly 8 years now, as company cars and various other things. But I am a proper petrol head as well. I do like my sports cars. As I mentioned in a previous video, I like the sound of a V8, V10, and I do like my petrol-powered cars. But I came into the EV side of it, not really because of the environmental reasons, mostly because I actually drove an EV for the first time back in 2013, I think it was, and just liked the way it drove. And for me, it was quite entertaining. I mean, modern cars are so reliable. You can just jump in them, do a motorway journey and not really have to think about it. But in an electric car, certainly back then, there's a bit of planning involved, and I quite like the challenge. So that's where my interest in electric cars started from. So thought I'd just go over my thoughts on the 2030 dates. It's going to happen. There's no getting away from that. Electric cars are the future. And if you look at the current crop of electric cars that you can currently buy, I think that possibly 80% of the population could probably make the switch to full EV now, based on their normal daily driving habits. What's the average daily drive? About 25 miles in the UK. Every electric car can do at least 4 times that's on sale in the UK today, so I think most people will be able to cope. But one of the things that I looked at earlier was on the SMMT website, just to have a look at the trend in petrol cars, diesel cars and battery electric vehicles, and this is what I found. So as you can see on the top line where it says diesel, I know it's been a bit of a funny year for car sales with COVID going on, but diesel this year is 38% down on diesel sales in 2019, petrol 21% down, and then underneath we have battery electric vehicle 195% up on last year. And it's been a similar story for the past 2 or 3 years. The battery electric vehicles have been increasing their market share hugely. But the interesting one for me on this graph is plug-in hybrids, the one below, PHEV. That actually has a smaller market share than full electric vehicles. Now, a lot of people tell me that they would only consider a plug-in hybrid because it's the best of both worlds. Battery for your local commuting, town work, but then an engine and a fuel tank for your longer journeys. It sounds great, but I'll explain my reasons why I think electrics are better in a second. Now, as a company car, I have run both the Hyundai plug-in hybrid and Hyundai Ioniqs full electrics as well. So I've got quite a bit of experience on plug-in hybrid and a full EV version of the same car, which is quite useful. Because in my previous employer, I had those as company cars. And the Ioniq PHEV, as a plug-in hybrid, it is very, very good. It will do 30 to 35 miles on a charge. And back then I was working about 20 miles away from work. I could drive the car all the way to work on the battery, charge it at work, drive all the way home on the battery, charge it at home, so I could use it as a full EV. And because 90% of my driving in that car was just commuting to and from work, over a 3-month period that I had that car for, I had an average fuel consumption of well over 600 miles per gallon. Very occasionally I actually went beyond the range of the battery, or the engine might kick in for a couple seconds up one of the bigger hills around here, and that was it. But the downside of it, I was using it as a full EV, but I'm lugging around an engine and a fuel tank, which doesn't really make sense. And to get the best out of the EV, you had to drive it a certain way. It did drive very, very well at town speeds, but when you're on the open road, you have to be careful with how much accelerator you put on, because you didn't want the engine kicking in. So you had to concentrate a little bit more, and so your driving style sort of changed a little bit, and that took a little bit of enjoyment away for me, although it was a bit of a challenge to keep that engine off most of the time. But the Ioniq electric, the first one I had was the 28 kilowatt. And again, because my commute was a 40-mile round trip every day, that car, I could literally just drive it in sport mode everywhere. Range wasn't an issue. I could charge it at work, charge it at home. It was a lot cheaper than putting petrol in a car. And I could actually enjoy the car in sport mode all the time. Well, why wouldn't you? It cost next to nothing to run, certainly as a company car. And then later on I was given the 38 kilowatt Ioniq. But maybe that's a video for another day, the differences between the two. I personally preferred the first one, the 28 kilowatt. But for my everyday commuting, the EVs were absolutely fine. And then the last EV company car I had was the Kona electric with a 64 kilowatt battery. And that car did have a genuine range of 300 miles. I did manage to get 300 miles out of that one. So range was just not an issue at all. But even in the 28 kilowatt Ioniq, I would easily drive that one all around the country on training courses. I'd comfortably take it away. My colleagues used to take the mick out of me and say, I can't believe you're taking that one, just take a diesel. But no, I was perfectly happy with the infrastructure, and I'd get there absolutely fine, and it never let me down. But some of the questions I come up against sometimes when talking about EVs, a lot of people say to me, the national grid just can't cope. If everyone had electric cars, the grid just wouldn't cope. But again, I was just looking up a few details on this. On the National Grid website, they actually mentioned that the peak energy usage for the UK was back in 2002 at 62 gigawatts. And that has fallen since, and it's now 16% lower. And most of that seems to be due to the fact that a lot of things are becoming more efficient, and there's more of a reliance on solar energy as well. So the grid is actually under less load now than it was nearly 20 years ago. But if everyone did go for a full EV overnight, not everyone's going to be plugging those cars in at the same time. I mean, between 5 in the evening and 7 in the evening, there might be a peak as people are returning from work. They might just plug their cars in, and there'll be a bit of a demand on the grid then. But again, the energy production in this country is a lot more efficient, it's greener. I'm confident the grid will cope. But also we've got smart grids around the corner. Some EVs now that are being produced are car to grid enabled, which basically means if you come home from work, say at 5 o'clock in the evening, you plug your car into the mains and it's got 60% charge in the battery. The car might think, actually, I don't need to draw power away from the grid at this point. I've got plenty in the battery, the grid's under load, I'll wait. Or the car might think, actually, I can feed power into the grid and help support the grid, and then off peak, when the grid's backed off a little bit, I'll start drawing energy back. And it'd be nice if you can sell energy into the grid and then draw it back at off peak at a slightly cheaper rate than what you sold it to the grid in the first place. So I'm sure all these things are right around the corner. And that would be quite an interesting one, actually. A lot of people worried about overloading the grid with their electric cars, but it actually might help the grid. The energy in your battery is supporting everyone else. So that can only be a positive. The other objection that I tend to come up against, especially down here, living in Devon, when I talk to people, is that they just say there's nowhere to plug them in. I can't have an electric car where I live, because where would I plug it in? And I was actually having a conversation with a gentleman a couple of months ago who lived in North Devon, and his reason for not going EV this time was purely because he said in North Devon there was just nowhere to plug an electric car in. So that's when I showed him ZapMap. Now, when I opened up ZapMap, this was the first screen that greeted us, and the gentleman went wide-eyed when you couldn't see the United Kingdom for charge points. And if I go to North Devon, which this gentleman had a bit of a concern about, as you can see, there are quite a number of charge points around, including rapid chargers. Now, a lot of these rapid chargers are actually very close to this gentleman's house, which he had no idea were there. And that's one of the other issues, really, with charging electric cars. When you drive past a petrol station, you know you're going past one. You can see it; it's lit up, it has the price boards illuminated outside. You are aware that it's there. Now, with charge points, quite often they're tucked out the way. They're usually in the corner of a car park, around the back of a pub or somewhere like that, and you're not necessarily aware that these charge points exist. If I zoom out a little bit, you can see even down in the southwest, which a lot of people have a bit of a concern about, we are actually very well catered for charge points down here. And especially in the bigger cities around the country, you can see they're absolutely well catered for with charge points. And one of the other objections that I regularly come up against with people with electric cars, actually I spoke to a gentleman last year, probably about a year ago now, and he said that he would not entertain an electric car until it could do at least 400 miles. To which I said, wow, how many miles a day do you do? And he went, well, I'm retired now, so I probably average 3 or 4 miles a day. And I thought, why do you need a car that will do 400 miles? And he described his normal, typical daily usage. It was just nipping to shops, visiting a few friends here and there, all very local. But he said, but a couple of times a year I like to visit family, so we do a long journey. It's about 300 miles. So I thought, okay. So for the once or maybe twice a year, you could probably hire a car. Hire a car from Enterprise or something, or Thrifty, and off you go. Do your weekend away and hand the car back, and you've got your EV sat at home. But with the range in certain EVs now, 300 mile, 400 mile journey is an absolute piece of cake. It's just entering into that mindset. I'm a classic example. I cannot drive 300 miles without stopping. I have to stop for a wee. And when I took the Porsche Taycan to Milton Keynes, I had to stop for a wee, and the car still had about 80 odd miles left in it. So I just plugged it in while I was in having a little break. And by the time I come back, it was amazing how much energy had gone back into the car in a relatively short time. So you probably find, if you have to stop for a wee anyway, just plug the car in, and you'll find that your journey time is probably no longer than if you took a diesel car anyway. I don't know many people who can drive 400 miles without stopping once. Certainly wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot of hours driving without a break. So even on long journeys, I don't find my journey time is any longer than if I took a normal petrol or diesel car, unless I was pushing it and not stopping. But for everyone's daily usage, you can probably jump straight into an EV now. Interested to see what you think. Anyone who would like to write in the comments whether you own an EV and how you find it, or whether you're interested in an EV and what your concerns are, and see if we can alleviate any of those fears. But me personally, I'm absolutely happy to have a full EV as my main car. It's an absolute piece of cake. Once you've driven an EV for a little while, soon when you jump back into a petrol car, the inconvenience and the hassle of actually having to go to a fuel station, it suddenly becomes an absolute ball ache. You leave work and you look at fuel lights come on, I've got to go to the fuel station, and you drive out your way, get to a fuel station. Quite often when I leave work, there's a queue at the fuel station. It can take sometimes as much as 10 minutes just to get to a pump. Put the fuel in, go in, pay, and then you drive past your work on your way home again. So sometimes it is an absolute faff putting fuel in a car. I could have been halfway home by the time it's taken me to put some fuel in. Because again, I'm lucky enough I can charge a car at work and I can charge a car at home. And actually, recently the rapid charger has only just opened up in one of the local shops, literally probably less than half a mile away from my house. So even if I couldn't charge at home, there's a rapid charger down the road. 20 minutes on there, do a bit of shopping, piece of cake. So the only thing that prevents me at the moment having, because I get a company car, so I don't actually need a car myself, but we do have a family car, and I've got 4 children, so there are 6 of us. So that does put a bit of a spanner in the works when you're looking at EVs. But there are some 8-seater EVs coming onto the market now. The one that I really like the look of, and I wish I could afford it, is the Mercedes EQV. That looks absolutely stunning, decent range, good battery, looks very nice, very practical. But I'm also looking at the Peugeot and the Citroen 8-seaters with a bit of interest, and I think Vauxhall will do one as well. So our 8-seater is up for renewal next year, so I'm currently investigating these. I mean, for us as a family, it would be absolutely brilliant. We've got a 4-year-old diesel 8-seater, and although we use the car every day and it feels like we use it a lot, in 4 years it hasn't done 10,000 miles yet. So an EV for us is a no-brainer. And again, if we did want to do a long journey, from say Devon and visit Scotland or something like that, it's about 800 miles away, we could take the EV and regular charge stops on the way up, or you could just hire a diesel-powered 8-seater for a week or a weekend and do it that way. I'll be perfectly happy to have every car as an EV. It's a piece of cake. But my final thought on the petrol diesel ban coming in 10 years' time, this is with my petrol head on. I will miss the sound of a good engine. As any sports car lover, we are going to miss that. And that's the only negative, really. Every time I hear a decent car coming along behind me, or you hear an engine, my head's turning, I'm looking for it, saying, "Oh, what's that?" And and I love driving them as well. I've recently driven a 981 Porsche Boxster GTS, and that flat six behind you, naturally aspirated, it sounded absolutely immense. It was absolutely brilliant, and that's the sound I'm going to miss. As good as EV sports cars are and are going to be, the straight line performance is just absolutely mental. I can certainly appreciate that, having driven both the Taycan 4S and Turbo quite extensively now. They are absolutely bonkers quick. I'm sure there'll be smaller, lighter EV sports cars in the future, but it's that sound. It's the engine is like the heart of the sports car, really. And although I didn't really miss it in Taycan, there are certain cars I think I would miss it in. Screaming V10 or nice rumbly V8. One of my favourite V8s is like a little TVR. 4 litre, 5 litre V8 rumbling along, lovely. So that's given me a bit of a thought. I'm quite happy for all of the mainstream normal A to B cars that manufacturers do to go full EV, no problem at all. But I think the manufacturers should be given a concession by the British government. They should be able to say to them that you can nominate 2 cars that you can nominate as sports cars, and those can be petrol, they can be naturally aspirated, turbocharged, they can be 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 cylinders, doesn't matter, but you're only allowed to sell 5,000 of them a year into the UK. So I think that would preserve the proper sports car. Now I'll use Porsche as an example. I've got a bit of experience with Porsche. They've got Taycan out at the moment, and it's actually one of Porsche's best-selling cars this year. We have Macan EV around the corner and about 2 years away, and there's no reason to suggest that Cayenne and Panamera will go full EV. And then that would leave 911 and Cayman and Boxster to carry on as a petrol sports cars. Why not? When everything else on the road is full EV, the emissions that are going to come out of a very small number of sports cars on the road in comparison, I don't think will make much difference personally. But I would like to save the sports cars for as long as possible. Like I said, it's the sound they make. I'm not talking about sticking a cherry bomb exhaust on your 1 litre Saxo or anything like that. I'm talking a proper engine. I think I'll ban 1 litre Saxos with cherry bomb exhaust. I'll ban them. But if you've got a proper engine, why not show it off? It's half the reason why I had an Impreza back in the day and I didn't go for an Evo, because I just like the sound of the Imprezas. Decent exhaust on it. Sound like Colin McRae, even at 20 mile an hour. Brilliant. But why not? I still think there is a future for petrol sports cars. Anyway, get all the boring stuff off the road, change them into EV. So anyway, that's enough of me ranting on. Be interested to see what everyone else thinks. Feel free to comment. I would love to know your ideas. If you think I'm talking absolute trash, then let me know. If you agree with what I'm saying, let me know. And if anyone else has got any thoughts on the future of EV and maybe preserving petrol cars, then we'll have a little discussion. But thanks very much for your time, and see you on the next one.